plenty of political red meat to pick over here. Let's do it one of the best in the business. Trevor Kavanagh is the former political editor of The Sun, and he joins us this afternoon on Talk. Good afternoon, Trevor.
Good afternoon, Duncan.
I'd like you to just wind your memory back to yesterday. I think it was some point late morning when social media lit up with Kemi Badenoch's message saying she sacked Robert Jenrick. What was your reaction?
Well, I thought immediately that she had handled it brilliantly. She had got something in the way of evidence. It was a boil that had long needed lancing, and she did so quite spectacularly and succinctly. And that was a good thing. I mean, that message that she put out was, what, 20 seconds, 30 seconds long? And it said everything. And I think that reform may come to regret accepting Robert Jenrick into its ranks, because I think that he is a snake in the grass, frankly, and has been a defector in waiting ever since Kemi was elected leader. And he's just been waiting for the opportunity to do the maximum damage in the process. In effect, by doing it as he did and allowing it to be leaked by people within his own group, I think the damage has been self-inflicted.
That's a really interesting take. I mean, what was your assessment of his speech when he was unveiled later yesterday afternoon as a Reform UK, their latest MP? I was struck by the fact that he spent a good chunk of time slagging off the party he's been part of, but also slagging off the government that he was part of. Yet less than 2 years ago, he was still quite keen to lead it.
Right up until the last moment, it seemed. But look, I think that loyalty counts, and it doesn't just count with the people to whom you're loyal. I think in the eyes of other people, loyalty is an important virtue. And I think that voters are going to look very much askance, not just at what he's done, but the way he's done it. He chose his moment, he attempted to choose his moment to cause maximum damage, and was thwarted by the fact, as I say, that people within his own ranks, which is very important to remember, deliberately handed over the copy of his speech to Kemi Badenoch's people. And I think, if anything, this has enhanced Kemi Badenoch, who had already begun to improve her status in the eyes of the voting public. The polls are showing that she's getting traction in a way that she hadn't up until recently. And I think this will add to the added charisma that she's developing. I think that the way she's handled it, the words she's chosen to use, have all been absolutely bang on target.
How does this latest defection feed into the narrative that Farage has very successfully been using for the last year and a half, which is the Conservative Party, it's game over, you can't trust them, they're the architects of where we find ourselves today, my mission is to destroy them. And yet this week we've had two former senior Conservatives join Reform UK. Can he still carry on running that line that the Conservatives are responsible for everything that's wrong with the United Kingdom today, yet is quite happy to open his doors to them?
Well, it's not just the fact that these are two Tory defectors. Both of them have had very harsh words to say about Nigel Farage and his party, Reform and UKIP, during the Brexit referendum in particular, but subsequently, and indeed Nigel has had harsh words about them. Quite recently he described Robert Jenrick as a fraud and said he had always thought so, and frankly I agree with him.
Let me ask you to pause for a second, because we have been playing out these clips, and I think it's interesting to hear them again, if not only to prove how politics can change very quickly and can be very fickle. So you rightly made the point that actually inside the last 4 to 5 months, that recently Farage called Jenrick a fraud. This is how he said it.
Robert Jenrick, under him as immigration minister, we got up to 56,000 people who'd crossed the channel by boat living in hotels. He put more people in hotels than even this Labour government. And here we are 3 years later, and he turns up and says, I'm on your side. My advice to you would be to say, this man is a fraud, this man is not to be trusted.
And just to prove we're fair and balanced here at Talk as much as we can be, these are some recent comments of Robert Jenrick about Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage can't even run a five-a-side team, so he's not going to be able to run a country. They're not a serious party. We may have sympathy with some of the things that they say. We may understand why millions of our fellow countrymen and women have gone to reform, but they are not the answer.
Two different clips there, Trevor. Just backing up what you said earlier, I had a number of previous contributors who are highlighting what they believe it's the issue, which is going to be it's only a matter of time before Farage and Jenrick lock horns, and there's only going to be one winner. How long do you think they've got?
10 minutes? I don't know. Look, I think that this is all part of the cut and thrust, the rough and tumble of politics. People make charges against their rivals and enemies and sometimes swallow them whole subsequently, as indeed both seem to be doing at the moment. But my bias comes down on behalf of Nigel in his description of Jenrick as a fraud. And I think that Jenrick's own track record, given a close inspection, shows that he's simply an attention-seeking egotist who will say anything at the given moment if he sees it's likely to benefit him and his chances of leadership. So, look, I think that all politicians need to be ruthless and some need to be unscrupulous, but there are certain moral imperatives that I think register with the voters, which is the most important thing. And I think that of the three parties, I think that reform has obviously benefited from the publicity. I think that Robert Jenrick has lost something by doing what is blatantly a betrayal, and Kemi Badenoch and the Tories have benefited by the way she handled this and the fact that she has right on her side in this particular argument.
I'd just like to get some reaction to something that's just appeared. This is an interview that the Times have just published following their session with Kemi Badenoch. They interviewed her, and this is one of the lines. She says, "I am clearing out the rubbish from the Conservative Party." That's quite a strong word, rubbish. The Tory leader accused Robert Jenrick of being a shameless liar and dismissed a deal with Reform, the party of traitors, her words, which could not be trusted. So that's a couple of lines from the Times, who have interviewed Kemi Badenoch, and that's just appeared online. I'm interested in your reaction to that, Trevor.
Well, I think that, as I say, Traitors is a great television program, and hugely popular. But that's showbiz. This is politics. This is the destiny of our country. It's in the hands of people like those people we've just been talking about, Jenrick, Badenoch, and Farage. And I just think that people will look askance, even those who support Nigel and Reform and will vote for the party in the next election, will wonder what on earth in the way of unwanted baggage they've inherited. And, you know, again, I think that Kemi has summed up these positions extremely well. She said that Nigel's doing her spring cleaning for her. He's cleaning out their garbage. And, you know, it's very difficult not to agree when you look at Jenrick's conduct. I think, frankly, a lot of voters will wonder if he's not actually a despicable politician.
Whilst I've got you here, Trevor, I'd love to get your thoughts on something else that gets a lot of reaction here on Talk, which is the postponement of local elections. I mean, actually a number of elections, the mayoral elections in various parts of the country for new mayors, they've been put back. We also have local elections in England, which aren't going ahead this year. Now Labour, I think I've got the timeline right here. Labour wrote to various council leaders saying, if you want to cancel these elections because of local government reorganisation, you can. A number of those leaders wrote back and said, yes, please, including some Conservative local authority leaders as well. There are claims of democracy being damaged. Reform UK have kicked off about it. Outside County Hall in Chichester in West Sussex, where I lay my head, Trevor, we even had the Lib Dems and Reform UK joining forces outside County Hall in a demonstration. What's your take on these cancelled elections?
Well, I think they're shameful and shameless. I think that you've got a party which is clearly in deep, deep trouble, and it knows that it's going to lose the elections that it's now postponed. So, you know, it's like the Mayor of London, Khan, was given an extra term, basically, or an extra year because of COVID.
Yeah.
And he seized it. He didn't think, saying, no, I should face the electors. Once politicians of a certain mark are in office, they would cancel every election that's up for running, up for grabs. They don't want to face the electors because they know they will be booted out.
And also, before I let you go, I mean, defence is something we've been talking about this morning. We know there's a renewed threat from Russia. We've also been talking about the potential of a new Chinese embassy that people say risks the security of this nation. There's a story circulating about this idea of our strategic reserve of ex-service personnel, and this, so they sometimes call it Dad's Army, which I don't know, I find quite offensive for people who have previously served for our country, but it makes for a good tabloid headline. And that veterans aged up to 65 now could be recalled as part of this strategic reserve of ex-service personnel who could be mobilised at pace in the event of a major prolonged conflict. We're not necessarily talking about 65-year-old blokes on the front line, but we might be talking about guys in their 60s who have served previously in logistics and whatnot. What's your take on this decision by the government?
Well, I think it's desperate cheese paring, isn't it? It's an attempt to shore up the alleged defence procurement that we've failed to address properly over more than just the last 18 months. Ever since the Berlin Wall came down, we've been reaping the so-called peace dividend and leaving ourselves wide open to the threat from people who didn't see it as a peace move at all. It was just the beginning or the continuation of hostilities by another name. And we've simply raised our hands in surrender to this. So, but this particular government, Labour, has approached the defence issue with a lot of smoke and mirrors policies in which they're saying they're increasing defence spending, when in fact it's gone into things like overseas aid and pensions. I mean, we're not buying the sort of artillery, the hardware that you need to defend this country. We're not even replacing worn out helicopters and ships that we desperately need to replace. So this is not to be taken seriously. And as you say, this is not to denigrate those people who have already served the country loyally, but to point out that we need fresh young faces and training and discipline among people who should be recruited to defend this country.
In many ways, this is a sticking plaster. Trevor, it's been a joy to hear your thoughts. Thank you. Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun and political Fleet Street legend, joining us this afternoon here on Talk. 03